Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote I picked just for this episode. The only cure for vanity is laughter, and the only fault that's laughable is vanity. Henri Bergson. My dear friend Tony Capullo is back. Episode 19, 112, 160. Born Again. If you haven't listened to that episode, 160, Born Again, listen to it. This is like kind of like a part two to that episode. So I had to pick this quote because I was listening. We were talking about laughter. Tony, thank you for coming back. And what do you like about that quote? I guess I should ask.
Well, in my business, I run into so much vanity, right? A lot of vanity. And some of it's a little laughable, to be honest with you. Some is laughable. Yeah, it's you always find the best quotes.
Thank you. Well, I mean, what sticks out, right? And the only fault that's laughable is vanity. Why is vanity laughable? I mean, this might be a lesson here, actually, from your observations dealing with so many successful people.
Have you ever seen the movie with Al Pacino, The Devil's Advocate?
I'm ashamed to say
it's
no.
old. It's like 1991. So, but
damn, it's on my list, and I'm pissed.
And he talks about that he is the devil, right, in disguise. But he says the greatest sin is vanity, right? And read that quote one more time.
Sure, here it is. The only cure for vanity is laughter, and the only fault that's laughable is vanity.
Yeah, that's laughable is vanity. I like that because, in this business, I ran into yesterday, vanity. And sometimes I shake my head because people will ask me things to do things, and it doesn't come from a place of delivering value as much as it does come from a place of vanity. And Jay, I think I've said this to you before, that there are things called vanity projects that I won't do. And there are people that want to do projects because they're vain. It's not really about delivering value. You know how Lightspeed, it says take knowledge from the people who have it to the people who need it, right? That's transformation, transference. Vanity, someone said to me, I said a vanity project, and someone said, well, what's a vanity project? A vanity project is done not for the benefit of the people who buy into the project, but it's mainly for the ego of the person doing the project, right? Whoa. Yeah, and I don't do those projects. And I've had people say, well, I want to do an 8-week program online. And I'm like, what? Okay, so tell me why you want to do it, right? And so what I started now to ask them is this an outcome-based project? And if so, what's the outcome? Because if you can't tell me the outcome, then it's really not. It's just time, right? It's just because people like to see advertisements for a program with their face on it, right? They want to say, oh, I did this program, I'm doing this program. They like that. It's vanity, right? But in the end, in my mind, it's about value, right? You don't have, and I understand that if you're a business person, that you have to have some vanity, right? But some of it is way over the top, so it's comedic.
Do you think people get lost in the idea of how they're serving the customer?
Oh, absolutely. No question. Not everybody. No, there's people that really, really are hell bent on delivering value. I was working with a guy. Actually, you talked to him. You had him on your show, and he's a really good guy. He's in Pennsylvania, right? And he's doing a kind of a unique kind of coaching, but he calls it outcome-based coaching. And I love that because outcome-based coaching. My friend and your friend, Steve Wilmer, who I have immense respect for, and I'll say his name because I love the guy, right?
We're launching him this week.
Yeah, I did a call with Steve the other day on Zoom, and there is nothing about his program that's vanity. It is all about a result. It's so he goes through the 4 F's, which is faith, family, It's faith, family, finance, and fitness. So when he coaches somebody, he impacts those areas of his life, those areas, right? And I said, tell me more. And he told me more. And I was so fascinated because everything he talked about was like, I'll give you an example. Let me back up. He'll say, he asked his clients before he takes them on, tell me your why. Why do you want to do this? Like what's driving you to do it? Someone who's just vain doesn't really care. They just say, well, right.
There's no depth.
That has a depth. Wilmer's one of my favorites. He just is. I mean, right. So and I think his, because he's a former Marine, right? And he has that real disciplined, right? It was so funny when I met him in 2019. He was on Lightspeed. He called me and he was driving like in the middle of nowhere. So I just remember it was like in the middle of nowhere. It was at night. I said, where? And I'd never met him, but he came recommended to me. He called me and said, hey, someone from State Farm told me I should call you. I said, okay, tell me what's going on, right? I was expecting a call, and it was late. He said, oh, I'm going to do a speaking gig and I'm driving, right? And he goes, it's cold. And so I started telling him about Lightspeed. I said, so when you get back, I'll show you a demo. He goes, well, that booming voice he has, that'll scare the crap out of you. He goes, well, I don't need to see a demo. I want to do it. I said, okay, but I really don't feel like it's appropriate to sell you something you haven't seen. So look, man, I just told you I want to do it. Right. Now here's an easy sale, but I felt like, well, I want the guy to see it, right? But he would listen. I showed it to him. I said, look, I just told him, I said, look, I need you to do this for me. I just need you to see it so it's tangible. Well, I've seen it. I've seen other people's systems. I'm like, okay, right. So I showed it to him for like, I don't know. We were in the demo for like 5 minutes. He's like, all right, let's just get this done. And he did.
How important is it to make a decision?
Well, really important.
Like, when you separate the wheat for the chaff, even for the chaff, what's the saying? With the wheat from the chaff, I think, or something like that, even the highest performers that you're counseling and leading with. And
I want to read this to you if I may.
Sure.
It's funny you ask me. I had this put on my website 2 days ago.
Nice. Read it. Yeah.
I only work with motivated individuals who are hungry to add additional revenue streams. These individuals are decisive, swift to act, and committed to an outcome. I don't deal with dabblers.
Ooh. Can someone become self-aware if they're listening that they're a dabbler when they don't know they are? Like, what are some of the behaviors of dabblers? Because
that's
like a social experiment.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you an example. That's a great question. So let's say I call you and I'm thinking about having you do a cultural assessment on my company.
Okay.
And I say, so tell me what that involves. And you go through the whole thing. This is the process. This is the cost. Right. I call you the next day and I go, hey, I need to do another Zoom. You say, like, what didn't I answer? Like, what question do you have? Well, I just got it. So we do another one, then a third one. Then eventually you go, okay, look, I've answered all your questions, right? There's nothing more to tell you. The process is going to change. The system's not going to change. It's yes or it's no. And dabblers, they do that. Well, I got to do no. Well, I got to do no. I had a guy, actually, he's from Philadelphia. He was in Philadelphia, and he just kept doing that to me. And I finally said, no more. Nope. And he said, well, he goes, I need a projection. A projection of what? He said, how much money I can make? Listen, I don't know because I don't know what the price point is. And I don't do that until I'm hired. And I mean, I've given you everything like 4 times, no more. And that's kind of what led me to say that, because right now it's I'll do one Zoom. I'll do a follow-up call if you have questions. But after that, I mean, it's very simple. It's a very simple process, right? So I'm going to throw this back at you. If I said to you, hey, I need you to do a Zoom with somebody that is interested in assessing their culture, and you say, okay, I'll do a Zoom. But if you call me up one day and go, hey, listen, that person, I'm on my third Zoom, man. I mean, they got me. It's frustrating, right? That's a dabbler. They're not really serious.
I can't imagine someone listening to this that doesn't relate to that at some level.
Okay, can I give you another example?
Please, this is
And
great.
this one sent my blood pressure through the roof. Because I know you're laughing, but I like the guy. And by the way, everybody listening who's a business person, self-employed, deals with dabblers. And dabblers are the most frustrating people, right? So I just decided I'm not dealing with them anymore. If you can't make a decision, that's on you. Like in that statement, I said these individuals are decisive, swift to act. So a guy in Mississippi, he's in Mississippi, wanted help with something. I said, okay, this was over a year ago. And he was the nicest, gentlemanly. I said, okay, right. He's like, well, he had spent all his money on somebody else that didn't help him. I'm like, well, he's like, can you fix it? I'm like, I mean, I can, right? And he kept wanting to do Zooms, right? So finally I said to him, okay, here's what I'm going to do for you. Now remember, I haven't been hired. He just kept calling. So, and I kept saying to him, well, the fee for this is this, this, right? So he called me one day and I said to him, I have somebody I'm going to introduce you to. And this person can connect you to a bunch of people that will buy your training. He's like, great. So I did it. And I was on the Zoom, so that's more time, right? The other person said to him, okay, here's what I need from you. And it was simple. He's like, how soon can I get that? He goes, oh, you can have it in like a day. Okay. Now I'm out of it, right? I don't know. 3 weeks goes by and the other person calls me and goes, hey, I still haven't gotten the stuff from your guy. I don't know, say right. 2 months goes by and this potential client calls me up and he goes, no, let me back up. I emailed him and said, where's the stuff? Because now the other guy's looking at me going, what happened? It's supposed to be a day. It's been months. He said, oh, I'm on vacation. You're on vacation? So as I was getting ready to move to Texas, he started calling me. I wouldn't answer. I was like, I didn't call him back. And he sent me an email saying, are you mad at me? I'm not mad. I'm just not wasting my time. He's like,
How
can we get on
important
Zoom?
is it to create boundaries?
Oh, it's everything. For me, it's everything in my business. I have interesting. Yesterday, I set a boundary. Someone was asking me, hey, can you do a Zoom twice a month with this group? I'm like, no, I haven't been hired. Why would I do a Zoom? Well, we want to talk about this. And no, we're not talking about anything. So in other words, you want me to spend my time so that you can make money and pay me nothing. No. I told him flat out, I said, so that's your theory? And he goes, yeah, I see your point. He's like, yeah. I'm like, no. The answer is no. He's like, well, if I send you our sales process, will you review? No, I won't. Why? I mean, why would I? Now, I will tell you, there are times when someone will say, hey, I need some help with something, would you, no problem. Let me see it. But it's the same people that dabble, right? Hey, can you look at this? Hey, can you do this? Hey, can you call this person? And that's kind of what happened in the other instances. I did help them a little bit, right? But finally, you mentioned boundaries. I think it's a great word. Is no, absolutely not.
Hey, what do you
And
think?
if you don't do it at the beginning, they will do it. They will do it, and they will milk you dry. And I've had it happen because it's on me because I didn't set the boundaries. And now I'm just
part of that is because you're such a giving person.
a
So
fool.
it's like a blessing and a curse if it's not created the boundary.
You have to create.
I think a lot of people could relate to that. I could relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, you start giving and giving and giving and giving and giving, and then they just expect. And the more you give, the harder it is to cut them off. Because then when you say, okay, enough, they go, well, what do you mean? Well, why all of a sudden? Right. So I just tell them, look, You know, you and I have a mutual friend, and that friend has it down right. Okay, he won't do a Zoom unless, I mean, in certain instances he will, but he's drawn a boundary. His is like, this is it. You hire me, you know, and if you hire me, I need to understand what the purpose of the Zoom is. It'll be 15 minutes or less. And I always thought, wow, that's pretty intense. Until I realized he's right. He's absolutely right.
What do you think of this idea? It just came to me. Well, not that it.
He and I mentioned you yesterday in the conversation.
Oh, well,
I'm flattered. Yeah, we were. Did actually last night.
Do you think there's value in someone actually investing in the consult first, and then like that's a filter for whether a platform like a Lightspeed is even relevant to them? I'm curious, like if we added a layer, meaning we're going to go consult, we're consulting first. So then they invest in that. There's value exchange because someone of your knowledge, someone of your intellect, someone of your experience is so valuable. And then a percentage of those people who clearly you're helping that respect you as a person, as they're paying, they'll be qualified for Lightspeed. I'm curious what you think of, like, maybe that piece, a missing piece.
You talk about adding a layer. Wilmer told me something that I had never heard of before. And then when he explained it to me, I'd never heard this before. In all the years, I've never heard anybody say this. And I started questioning about it, not in a bad way, just tell me more. So what he suggested to me was, if I do it, I'll do it 30 minutes with somebody just to see what it is, you know, see if I want to do it. He said at that point, he's like, would you do a proposal? I'm like, I don't like to do them because I pretty much tell them what it is, right? But yeah. And he said, do you charge to do the proposal? I'm like, no. He said, you should charge them $500 to do the proposal. If they don't accept it, you get the $500. I'm like, I never heard of that. That's the layer. And the more he explained his reasoning, the more I thought, he's right. So now I'm learning after all these years, I'm learning from, you know, people.
Smart.
Wilmer, Zach Conley, who has a great business model, right? You take little bits and pieces and go, yeah, that's kind of interesting, right? Because you never know it all, right? So you think you do, but you don't. But let me tell you something. I wish if I could go back, the dabbler thing is something I wish I had corrected long ago, because it has cost me so much time and effort for people who have wasted my time. Tell me, oh yeah, you know, I actually, this is funny, years ago, I went to, oh man, I don't remember what year it was, 96. Okay. I went out to a hospital, their corporate office in Alabama. And the guy said to me, now remember, I'm going blind, right? I talked to him on the phone. I go there and he says, this is what I want you to do. I said, okay. So tell me what this is going to cost me. I said, well, the upfront fee is 10 grand. He said, okay. He leaves the room, comes back, gives me a W-9, gives me 10 grand. I said, okay. When do you want me to start the project? He says, well, can you send me the scope? I'm like, sure, right? It was 4 hospitals. So well, time goes by and I'm waiting for him to, I have to schedule to be on site at those hospitals, and never heard from him. Like, other than his secretary kept saying to me, he's just really busy and he'll get to you, So like a year goes by and I'm sitting and I'm like, look, I'm just going to send you 10 grand back because I felt, and she's like, no, he doesn't want it back. He wants you to do the work, but he just has to just be on a schedule, right? 2 years I had that money, and then he leaves. So I'm thinking, well, I felt almost guilty. So, I mean, and I kept asking her, you sure? She said, oh, no, he wants you to keep, he wants it. Someone came in like 2.5 years later, and I got hold of that person. And I said, look, you want to do this? And they're like, yeah, I want to do it. And they said, what's it cost? Oh, I just changed the date in the proposal and sent it to you. And I did the work for 3 years. But that wasn't even a dabbler. He paid. Usually they don't pay.
What would be your advice to the listener around that? Why'd you do that? Why didn't you just go, saunter on off and just kind of forget about it and keep the money?
Well, if you think about it, right, the business it was a compliance business, and we always used to talk about integrity and doing the right thing, right? We're telling hospitals, do the right thing, as painful as it may be to you, right? And it wasn't painful to me. I mean, I wasn't the one just sitting there, right? I had an account for upfront payments like that, so it was just sitting there.
Wow.
And I had a similar thing happen with a nationwide lab, and at the end they sold. I did the project. At the end, they sold, and the agreement was at the end, the retainer would be put, the upfront payment would be put to the last invoice. So the billing person forgot to do that when we billed them, so they paid the whole thing. So I reached out. Now remember, they're not even in existence. They sold to some company in Connecticut. I had to call the company in Connecticut and say, hey, I got this money, and who do I send it to?
Because they overpaid you?
Yeah. And they said, well, you did such a good job, just keep it. Like,
No way, really?
That's what he said, yeah.
What did you think at that time?
I mean, I was like, well, I need to send you a letter that says you authorize that, because I don't want you to come back to me in 3 years saying, well, I didn't say that, So I told him, well, look, here's what I told him. I told him, well, so going forward, you'll have an $8,000 credit. So I'll put it toward, if you want some compliance work, I'll be happy to do it. Right. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. And they did actually call me a few times for stuff. Definitely not $8,000, but I helped him.
What's your advice to the listeners on how to build long-term relationships with the people that you serve?
Man, that's such a great question. Man, you're asking great ones today, brother.
I'm excited. I thought we were going to talk some melodramatic stuff.
Great.
Now we're like,
yeah, this is great
value.
So again, your timing today is like impeccable. So think about this. This just happened. Everything just happened that you're asking the question, sir. So I was talking to someone on Sunday afternoon, and he's a business coach. And he's a very, very good personal friend of mine. Because he's a personal good friend of mine, we've just never. He actually helped me start the compliance business.
Wow.
He would sit with me twice a week, and because he had his own business, and tell me all the things I needed to understand about business. Right. He'd spend time, we sit and have coffee. So now he's a business coach. He has 168 active clients.
Holy cow.
Yeah, he's good. And he said to me, and I said to him, I said, do you know what your retention rate is? Before the words got out of my mouth, he said 88%.
88.
I said, 88. He's like, yeah. He said, it would have been higher, but he's like, I expected to be in the 90s. It was at 91, but it's 88 because when I got cancer, the people that I personally were coaching didn't want someone else coaching them because he's a staff. So I lost a couple, right? Like 88% is unbelievable. He said, why? He asked. So because I know somebody else whose retention rate is zero over the last year. I said, tell me the key to your retention rate besides the result. He said, I build trust in the relationship. They need me, I'm there. I'm honest with them. I hold them accountable. I'm their friend, but I'm their coach. And he talked about the relationship. Jerry Acuff, who I mentioned a lot, has this unbelievable program on how to build relationships in your business. And in fact, this afternoon, I am going to be talking to Glacier Coaching. They have 8,000 schools, high school coaches, because they want Jerry's relationship program. How do the coaches build relationships with the kids? And Jerry, I said, Jerry, we were talking about this, and he said, well, think about this, because Jerry coaches 2 college basketball coaches, high level ones too, one at Texas A&M. He said, how do you ask a kid to go out there, buy into your program, right? Be a leader to your team if you don't have a good relationship with them? And that relationship needs to start from day one. And I was fascinated by this, right? It's all about relationship. Jerry will tell you the relationship edge. And I told him that you're a great salesperson, no question. That relationship thing it's the bomb.
Well, yeah, that's what makes him a great salesperson.
I mean, look at our relationship, right? Started in Lightspeed, right? Whatever year that was, 2019, right?
Years.
It had to be 2019 because 2020 was COVID, and I left that building then, right? So it had to be before that. I left that building. I started working from home in March of 2020 because of COVID.
It was 2018 even.
Oh, was it really? Yeah, it might have been. Yeah, you're right. I think you're right. I have a picture on my phone.
There's a video of us with me wearing an outfit that looks like I dressed myself in a dark room.
Or you took fashion advice from me.
That was before Jenna started helping me out. I was wearing I don't know, a crazy tie, purple floral shirt, yelling in a room with Zach.
I'm going to tell you, yeah, it was 2018. And the reason I know, I think it was that because you and I took a picture together right before I left to go to Virginia I met with Jerry and Janine Driver, and that was in 2018. Who, by the way, called me the other day.
I got to have her back on the show. She was like the 3rd episode of the Culture Matters podcast. We filmed it in her studio at her Body Language Institute. It's crazy how long that.
I always tell people, be careful what you ask her.
Yeah, she's a joy. I enjoy. I mean, I would actually recommend listeners listen to the episodes, like episode 3 or 4 of the Culture Matters podcast, and people love listening to her. Her listening, listeners,
yes,
through the roof.
Ben Reinberg, because I think he's on the show, right?
Yeah, great, another great episode for especially people interested in commercial real estate and mindset around that.
He had her on his podcast not once but twice. That's how fascinating he was.
I Own It, right? That's his show.
Yeah.
We could shout out. Did he end up having a good time on dropping bombs? Did that happen?
Yes, he did. It did happen. Thank you very
awesome.
much. Because you and Jenna made that happen. Yeah, he went to Vegas and he did that. It's so funny. People, you go back to vanity, right? There's another example. People want to be on podcasts, right? So they can say, "Oh, I was on this podcast," right?
Brad is uncomfortably famous, and I'm so happy for him. And he's a special, special, special man. And it's really amazing to see people see him for who he is as a person.
Again, going
after
back
all these years.
Going back to your impeccable timing again. So this happened this week. So somebody told me, hey, reach out to this guy, and you and he would really do. He's pretty high level, but I think he'd be really interested in what you do and have a conversation with him. Okay, so reach out to the guy. The guy writes me some short shit answer back, right? Yeah, I'm real busy. Whatever. The next day, I wake up and there's an email from the guy. And he said, hey, I want to apologize if my answer seemed really short. I went to your website. How do you know Brad Lee? Right? I didn't know you knew Brad Lee, right? I've been a fan of it. So I write back and say, well, that's the reason I ended up in Vegas, right? Worked at an office on his floor for 3.5 years, right? Now all of a sudden the guy's like, well, we need to talk, right? Because he saw the picture.
How do you feel about that?
I think he has done, Brad, just such an amazing job of um he's like a star, right? So I'll give you an example. I was telling somebody yesterday, there's a guy here in Texas. He lives in Frisco, Texas. His name is Ryan Stewman. Ryan's a pretty big deal, right? And Ryan does these events. They're always in June. He didn't do a lot of them, but he does one in June. And he brings all these ballers, Alex Rodriguez and Rick Ross and, David Goggins, right? He does all these superstars. And he does it. He can't do it in like a hotel. He's got to do it like an arena.
Hmm.
And I saw the ad for it in May online, and they put the little heads of the picture of the people speaking, and Brad was on there. And I'm thinking, that's pretty well known you made it when you're on Stewman's thing.
Hmm.
I think it's phenomenal what he's done, because I met him in 2013. I mean,
How did that happen again?
I was looking for some way to establish recurring revenue for the compliance training. And I happened to be on Twitter, and Jeffrey Gittimer.
Jeff,
was he ever on your show?
I wish I used to read his little books when I was the little sales, the red book of sales. When I was like 18.
Yeah, the little gold book.
I read like 20 of them or something.
So he posted.
He's still alive?
Yeah, he is. I don't know where he is, but he's still alive.
Hope he doesn't hear this. That's like a
yeah. I've never met him.
Poor guy. I mean, he seemed great.
He faded, but he posted something on Twitter that said, it was in reference to Lightspeed. If you're not trading on Lightspeed, then you're missing out, kind of. So I reached out to Jeff Lee, Brad's brother, on LinkedIn. And Jeff said, "We'll just call the office and schedule an appointment." So I went there with 5 people.
Really?
I took 5 people with me. And we all sat, and Brad, he couldn't have been more hospitable.
Wow. And the rest is history.
Yeah. I mean, 10 years ago. And then, Brad Carly was my assistant, and then Brad hired her.
It was like a merger.
It was a little bit cool, very cool, because he called me up, and very respectful, by the way. Called me up at it was late at night, and he called me up and he said, "Hey, I don't want to poach your people, but she happened to be in Vegas with Jerry Acuff at the time."
Hmm.
And he said, "But I would," and at that point I had made the commitment I was going to Vegas. So I had to figure out what I was going to do with her. Either she didn't want to go. And he asked if he could hire her. I'm like, "You can, but I don't think she's going to go to Vegas. But if you can, yeah, I mean, thanks for asking." And he made it happen.
Yeah, why is that?
We made it. We did that. We did that deal that night.
Wow.
She called me up at like 1 o'clock in the morning. She had been at his house, so it was 10 o'clock Pacific time, and I was on the phone with her. I was going back with him, and then it was done in the morning.
What's the wisdom? I think there's wisdom in that. The getting the call, because people can relate to this. They've either been in a situation where they want to bring someone on that maybe a friend, a colleague has employed. Like, why was that a good feeling to get that call? And would you suggest people do that?
Oh, absolutely. He was very respectful. I mean, he was like, look, he could have just pulled her aside when he saw her and said, "Hey, is this something you want to do?" But he showed me the respect of asking me, right? And it was like, yeah. I mean, and I didn't look at it as poaching because I was leaving anyway, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was going to keep her. I just didn't know how. And then also, she had worked for me for, I think, 6 years. And we put her through training, right? She had a business coach at the time. And you do that knowing full well that the person is going to get better and go somewhere else. And I knew it was going to happen with her because it was like her second year. I was getting, like, she was doing a lot of stuff with pharmaceutical manufacturers. Pfizer asked me if they could hire her.
Wow.
Yeah. Bristol Myers Squibb wanted to hire her. And I was like, look, it's up to her. I mean, she didn't want to interview though. But when he asked me, you can if you can get her. And so I'll never forget this. It was so clear. She called me after I talked to him. And she was at a dinner with Bakehoff and said, hey, Brad just called me. Must be an Uber to his house after this dinner. I'm like, go. She's like, you're cool with him? I'm like, absolutely. And on her way back from his house, she called me and she was sobbing. And I said, what are you sobbing about? And she said, because I want to do it, but I feel disloyal. I'm like, look, no reason to feel disloyal. And she, as much as I appreciate that, but he was very respectful. And I do think that when you do something like that, you certainly have to ask the person, even if you don't know, because it's kind of disrespectful to just poach people.
Mm. Do you think that this is why people have wanted to work with you over the years because of your attitude around these things?
No, but I appreciate that. There's a flip side of this too, that I think people have to. It took me a while to come to terms with this part of it. There's people that you'll do business with that you will just never get along with. And that was hard for me because I like people. And I didn't at first understand. Someone would say something to me and I would, why would you say that? Right. And it took me a while to realize that you just can't. If 95% of them are happy, it's a pretty good rate, right? But those other 5%, no matter what you do, they're going to be happy. I had a guy tell me recently, he's like, well, you're vague. I'm like, okay, so he told me you're vague. I'm like, okay, what's vague? Tell me what you don't understand, because you never asked me any questions. I'll say, okay, everything good? Yeah. Now I'm vague. It's like, well, give me specific instances. And he couldn't. Like, all right, well, sorry for being vague.
I was listening to a book the other day on the Ritz-Carlton Horst Schulze, who turned it around. Now, he did mention that 2% of the he mentioned that 2% of the customers, you can get 98%. That was his big, he was real, it's just reminding me of this. And he told a story about this one guy that was accused of pinching women in like the high end section of the hotel, and they did everything they could to try to appease this guy, and then they ended up going up the chain when they heard about the pinching. So then he got on there and said, listen, get him a hotel somewhere else and get him a limo and graciously explain to him why we can't help him out, but we can't have him stay here anymore. And then long story longer, and then I'm coming up months later where he heard of this some other guy, but then he knew it was the same guy at another hotel. And it was the same process, like get him a limo, get him a hotel somewhere else, and tell him the truth. It was just funny.
You talk about relationships. I think that's such an impactful topic for your listeners. And I will say this, you're a master at building relationships and nurturing relationships.
Me?
Yep. And I'm going to tell you,
Thanks.
But and it rubs off, just so you know. By the way, while we're here, over the last, I've been in Vegas or Texas for 40 days. I have learned more and become more aware about culture than I ever thought I'd know. It's fascinating me. And that's because we do the interviews. I've learned a lot, and I saw something the other day. I didn't send it to you. It was this week. whereas some Major League Baseball player got traded. He said, well, I didn't want to play there anyway. The culture was toxic. It's everywhere.
Holy cow.
He said it was. He said there really was no culture. It was just kind of like everybody just did their thing, but it was toxic. But you talk about these relationships. I think one of the things that really you're very, very, very good at is, I've noticed this. You are really, really good at setting your ego aside and saying you're open to feedback. Most people are not. Most people take feedback as criticism. You don't get all defensive, right? You don't get all, upset and that kind of stuff. And it helps, the two-way communication. It builds a relationship. I think it's wonderful how you do that, by the way.
Thank you. I'm trying to do the best I can with that, because I think that is a variable of how to create culture. It's like, and I don't get to live through you or anybody else. I have to live through my own body, my own experience. So I got to be open to the feedback, or else how do we have growth together? It's plagued me, that thought.
Well, you definitely walk your talk, brother. That's for sure.
In the spirit of that, Born Again, episode 160, we talked about adversity that you have been challenged with over the last year or so, where you've had to walk your talk. How are you doing?
That's a really good question. I try to. I've gotten better at it because I'm more self-aware. Wasn't always good at it, let me tell you. You and I have, and I'll mention him by name because he's great. Who's really helped me is Christian Conte.
Yeah, he's great.
He's unbelievable. A 5-minute conversation with Christian can turn your whole mind around about how you look at things, right? And he has a way of simplifying things. And I'll tell you, if there's somebody who walks his talk, it's him. And that's probably hard, very, very hard to do because he's always so zen. I don't know if I told you this story, but he was doing I forgot who told me this story. He was doing like a workshop, a boot camp of somewhere. And he was talking about anger management. He was an anger management specialist, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. There's only like five level 5 anger management specialists in the country. He's one. So
wow, that's wild.
Yeah. So I think as the story goes, and I'd have to ask him, but he was driving from the hotel to the event the second day. And one of the students in the class sees him in traffic, says, now I'm going to test it. Starts honking at him, tailgating him, right? See if he can irritate him. He said, no. He's like, I couldn't believe he said, I'm doing everything to irritate him. He's not getting irritated.
That's a lot of power to have somebody even want to throw you off. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. He is, well, you interviewed, right?
Yeah, that would I wish I had the memory recall to, because when I shout out the episodes, because I looked it up, he's got to be season 7 or 8 or 9. Great episode, Christian Conte.
And then he does,
Dr.
he in Hendo.
Jason Henderson
Are really good friends, and that's how I found Jason. But Christian called me up one day and he's like, hey man, you got to meet this guy. I'm like, who is it? He's like, I spent 6 hours in the car. He's like one of the most intense people you ever meet, right? And he's smart.
Yes, super.
And I know you and I are planning something with both, right? So
dude, he's like, I read I used to read those Halo books as a kid. because that was like my generation, sci-fi. And there's the main character in Halo is the Master Chief. So whenever I'm talking to Jason, I'm thinking of like in that movie, that's like the most badass guy that kills all the aliens kind of thing. And he kind of is that, but in real life.
Yeah, he's
like he's really served our country and but he really understands culture very well. I was thoroughly inspired by the dialogue. I challenge anyone listening to this. I think it's episode 158 or 157. Jason Henderson been released.
he is
Listen to it.
he's a fascinating guy. And I think what's even more fascinating that he and Christian are friends. I think that's the thing that fascinates
Well, I
me.
guess that leads me to, it's episode 157. Something I want to ask, just based on this conversation, you're a Swiss Army knife of people in positions of value that give value, get and give. So, if someone's listening to this wants to be as in tune with their network as you are, where do they start?
That's a good question. I think you just to build a network, you mean?
And to be in tune with it, like even in this conversation, I'm reminded of the philosophy professors I like to listen to on YouTube that they talk about Rene Descartes like they knew them, or they talk about what Hobbes was thinking here, or how Plato did this. You're like that, but for subject matter experts. Yeah, so Kevin Elko's theory of like, it's the most beautiful thing to watch as a student of culture of people, because that's like the great teachers do that. Now, you're not just a great teacher, you actually know these people. So the philosophy professors I like to watch, they don't know Rene Descartes. They just read them so deeply. They know what they were thinking. You're like that.
I appreciate it. I
even
mean,
just in this conversation, if I can recall, like Elko and Conti and Jason and Wilmer and Brad and Janine and like some that you didn't mention, or Ben, some you didn't mention that I think I might know, Jerry. Like, think about the amount of information. So like, where does the lay person start that might have some of the gifts that you have, but they haven't built the skill set yet or the experience?
I mean, everybody's got relationships, but you hit on it, it's relationships, right? Like I mean,
You honor the peer friends like in a very beautiful way.
I
know what they know, and you share.
I met you at Lightspeed. I met Jerry. I cold called him, which I don't, right?
Holy cow!
I
we
met.
got to do more of that together then.
I met Elko. I cold called him. Right, told me no 3 times. Right. I met Conti through Elko. I met Hendo through Christian. So it's those could connect the dots thing, right? So you just kind of start reaching out, right? But I think like when you and I talked about this, when we do your interviews, is there has to be something of value.
I think I want to unpack this on our next conversation, really just the work ethic that you're bringing into this, because I guess we can leave an open loop on that. But you're saying you cold called. I mean, you go from not having a relationship with a person at all. We should talk about cold calls, really, because think of the concept of that and what if you hadn't done that.
With Elko, I was reading a book, and it mentioned him in it. It was a book. It was a book called "How Great Do You Want to Be?" And it was written by Nick Saban of the University of Alabama, and he mentioned Elko. So I'm like, I googled him, and
Wow.
There's a guy, and unfortunately, and I know we're gonna run out of time, but I want to mention him. His name was Jeff Burrows. I don't know if you ever spoke to Jeff.
He's been on the podcast. Great guy. Great episode.
He just recently passed away, and in 90. What year was it? 90. I don't remember what year it was I met him, but 2005 actually. But I had bought a real estate program on DVDs back when there was DVDs, and it was Donald Trump's How to Buy Real Estate. So I put it in the DVD player at home. And before he get to the program, he says, well, just, I have these other programs. One of them is with Jeff Burrows, the Entrepreneur Success Code. If Jeff Burrows doesn't know your business, no one does. Well, I stopped the DVD. I started Googling the guy.
Wow.
So I emailed him to his website. Next day I get an email. Coached me for 8 years.
Holy cow.
Coach Carly. He coached Carly.
I'm sorry?
He coached Carly.
Wow.
He came to Fort Lauderdale and spent 3 days with her, and then we bought his coaching program for her. I mean, but the point is, how funny, right? How funny that's how I met him. I mean, I just reached out and said, hey, I heard you on this thing. And as Trump says, if Trump knows, and then he told me the whole Trump story, how he got hired by Trump, right? It doesn't really matter if you like Trump now or don't. That's the point, because this was 2005. So I don't know. I didn't even listen to the real estate thing. I bought the whole thing and then I ended up with Burroughs, right? Wow. But it's a shame because I talked to him in March and said, I'll talk to you next week. And then he wasn't alive.
That's another thing is I had been meaning to call.
Yeah.
And right, like how many of those people in our life, like, oh, I've been meaning to call. Oh, you can't now. That bothers me. And maybe that helps somebody that's listening to this. Like, who do they need to call? And I have to think about, like, who do I need to call now? Who do I like to call? Because I really got along with Jeff. He was he was helpful and smart, and he had a lot of experience. People should listen to that episode. And then, and when you told me that happened, what a
total stunner. Total stunner.
Yeah, like it made me realize, among other things, got to move more quickly. Got to move more quickly.
Yeah.
We had a very light dialogue around doing the most eerie thing, actually, I've never told you. He was curious if I had any experience with families, cultural transition.
Who asked you that?
Jeff, like, before COVID, like when we had first really connected. And never then did I end up, and the answer at the time was no actual anecdotal experience. But that's a route that we ended up going into just by happenstance. And I wish that's something that I could be doing with him today. And that pains, that's a painful thought.
Yeah. Wonderful guy. I mean, just really, it took me, I was so shocked when his wife told me that. She asked me if I would write her a letter. And in the letter, because there wasn't a service, what I remember most about it, and there's a lot of good things, but one thing that strikes me, and all the time I knew him, this was 18 years, I never heard him once raise his voice. One day we were talking about something, and I pitched a fit about something, not at him, but just pitching a big fit about blah, 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 blah. And he's just sitting there listening. Are you there? Right. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, are you listening to me? He's like, he kind of giggled. He's like, yeah, brother. And then I start to laugh because he's totally unfazed, right? So he let me vent, and then he got me right back to, we did a thing with him in Florida where he did a whole day long thing at the where was it? There's a big hotel. We had a big draw. He did the whole day.
It might be fitting to I guess loop this conversation right back to the beginning based on Jeff.
Yeah.
And how he interacted with you that day. And I'm going to read the quote once again and leave it up to you to end this show.
Okay.
The only cure for vanity is laughter. And the only fault that is laughable is vanity.
Yeah.
And then he was giggling at you. So what do you want the audience to take away from this conversation?
I don't know. We touched a I think that the takeaway is just how important and impactful relationships can be. And they all count. They all count.